I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. And what I'd like you to take away for today's show is our greatest growth comes from our greatest failures. Today's guest is Eli Harris. Let's welcome him and get to know his story. How you doing, Eli?
I'm doing well. I think I was saying earlier, I am busy, but busy is better than bored. And I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. So a lot of my listeners aren't going to know who you are. You want to give them a little bit of background of, childhood? Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. A really
bad area.
Not a bad place to call home. Very fortunate. I went to school out east, and then when I was 21, I moved full time to China. Started out on the foreign service track. I did a couple Fulbrights in Beijing, and ended up working in the private sector. I was making drones for a while with DJI, and then 5 years ago started my first venture, manufacturing large lithium-ion batteries. Had a lot of ups and downs, and was fortunate and had a small exit in 2019. Not what I fantasized, but I have some good stories there. I came back to the States. I took a little bit a year to recalibrate. Was doing a little bit of teaching, and then I launched a new venture in the wake of the pandemic, which has been growing very quickly. Yeah,
let's go. All right, so I want to jump into your first business that you started. What was the first business you started?
So it was called EcoFlow. We were manufacturing large lithium-ion battery packs, and our goal was to build a energy storage system, a lithium-ion battery that could outcompete the Honda 2000 gas generator. And that's what we were trying to do. We're looking at the world and how it's transitioning from fuel combustion to batteries, and that was our mission. So prior to that, I was at DJI, the drone company. And I was working on enterprise drones. So drones in construction, mining, public safety, search and rescue. And if you're a hobbyist flying a drone for 20 minutes taking selfies, that's all great. But if you're looking for a missing person or mapping an oil pipeline, you have to keep a drone in the air much longer. So I was working very closely with our battery engineering team. I was based in Shenzhen, China, and our team was in Shenzhen, China. I got to know those guys very well. And our idea to build a drone recharging hub that was lithium powered quickly evolved into an idea for a new venture. I said, you know what, this can actually be product agnostic. It doesn't need to be a recharging hub for drones. We can build a lithium battery system that could be effective at charging any gear in the field. So I spun out with two engineers, both Chinese, in Shenzhen. We incorporated the company in Shenzhen, China. And over the course of 3.5 years as CEO of that company, I ran our entire sales and marketing operations, and my partners were on the product side. We raised a lot of money. We spent a lot of money, and we kind of subscribed to this Silicon Valley growth at all costs model. So we were raising and growing. We ended up shipping over 200,000 products to 37 countries. We built 2 battery manufacturing plants from scratch. We had over 100 employees, but we were not profitable. And we were just, we were raising and burning cash. We were growing. We thought we had an acquisition offer. We signed a binding letter of intent for an acquisition. We spent 6 months negotiating that deal. We thought it was closed. I celebrated. I texted all my ex-girlfriends. I told all my family. I thought I was a multimillionaire. We even let go a third of our team because only 2/3 of our team were coming with us in the transition. And we had thought we had been acquired. In the due diligence period before the money was wired, we were actually investigated for corporate espionage by our previous employer, DJI.
Really?
Yeah. So when that legal investigation was filed, the acquisitor pulled the offer. So after 6 months negotiating this deal, after celebrating, thinking the deal was closed, we ended up in this criminal investigation, which ended up being dropped. But the acquisition offer was pulled. We were out of cash. We were desperate. The capital markets tightened in China, and we ended up raising a little bit more money from a state-owned enterprise in China. But with that raise, I was actually let go as CEO of the company, and I was bought out it was far from what I expected. But after almost 4 years at that point, and putting my whole heart and soul into this, my entire identity, and going through a pseudo acquisition, I ended up with a small buyout and a good story to tell. But it was not what I fantasized.
Yeah, I mean, so that investigation, do you think they were getting back at you for leaving and taking a couple of engineers with you?
So
I mean, you know how sometimes companies do that to mess, they hear you're doing this and you left this company and they're trying to get back. I mean, a lot of people are vindictive. You don't have to answer the question. I'm just like, it seemed like it was the perfect time for somebody to mess with you.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, the investigation was filed in response to their learning about our acquisition. I mean, they had 3 engineers who left the company to start a venture that had quick, immediate success and was about to make a lot of money. And I think the natural thing for any employer to do is to do an audit, unfortunately, rather than having a frank, amicable conversation, they went straight to a legal investigation.
Right.
So I think it's only natural, and I think it's fair to do an audit if you have employees leave a company. There was no contractual. There was a lot of overlap. We started working on this venture while we were still at the previous company, which we were contractually able to do, but it raised enough of a flag for them to launch an investigation, which eventually was dropped.
No, I got that. I just was, because I mean, you never know how, because you don't know how the people could have been leaving already and then go, oh, I hear you want to do that. Let's go with you and I'll do this with you. You never know why people are leaving. You can't. But now this is all in China, which I'm sure it's totally different there than in other places when it comes to business.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Right. And I mean, and how's the labor, and we'll get into that labor, but the laws in the United States, I'm sure, I don't know if say they're more lenient or more restrictive than they are in China. It's just unique that you went to China to do all this. And I'm not saying you should do it in California or in the United States. I'm just saying for most people, they wouldn't even think of what you just did. You left Santa Barbara, did all this stuff, excuse me, and went over to China and you started your companies because that's where the technology was, I assume. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just to give a little bit of my path and how I got there and how this happened. I mean, I always thought I wanted to work foreign service or hold public office of some sort. So I went out and did my Fulbrights in Beijing and thought that was kind of earning my stamps and accolades, and wanted to go on the foreign service track. And I kind of quickly realized I was very rosy-eyed and naive and thought that I personally could participate and influence this new global generation that doesn't see borders and kumbaya collaboration. But the truth is, I mean, when you're working foreign service, I mean, you have a fiduciary duty to execute a national mandate. You are there to serve a duty and to execute a mandate, and whatever that mandate is from our president. And your own convictions and thoughts are fairly irrelevant. I mean, that is not why you're there. So I got jaded pretty quickly, but I was very committed to learning Chinese. I loved that whole process. I liked the academic component. I liked the academic rigor and challenge of learning the language, but I also liked everything that came with it. Just that experience of moving to another country, learning about the history, the politics, the culture, the economics. It was just this really eye-opening experience. And I worked hard and I was pretty good at it. And there was this positive feedback loop, and I felt special, and people would tell me how great I was for trying to learn the language and speaking it, and I doubled down, and I eventually became fluent. It's as good as my English now, which I'm proud of, because I just spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours working on it. But the truth is, just being an American on the ground in China, speaking Chinese, I was able to command much more authority and respect than I could ever command at my age in the US. So I was able to really skip 10, 20 years of career growth just because I was willing to be there. And I feel like people always expect a great nuanced answer as to my career path. But the truth is, I was just having fun. I felt special. I liked feeling special. I was working hard. I was good at it. There was a positive feedback loop. And and doors kept opening. And I literally walked into a hotel bar in Shanghai, and that's what ended up turning into a job at DJI, the drone company. And then I didn't know anything about drones at the time. I didn't even know the company existed. I should have. They're the largest commercial drone company in the world, but that world was foreign to me. But just because I was there and showed up, and I think fairly humble, but was willing to put myself out there, I got this incredible experience to work there. And by working with the battery guys and just again being open-minded, I ended up building 2 great relationships, and that turned into building a company out of China, something I never thought I would do. And the ability to raise venture capital money and go and build a manufacturing plant and ship product to different countries. I mean, at my age, it would have been much harder to do that in the US. So I feel very fortunate for that experience, and I was able to take those learnings now and come back stateside and have this unique experience and story to tell and skill set that I think a lot of Americans lack. I think especially in the US, a lot of engineers, they want to build the next sexy social media app, or they want to design the product, but fewer folks actually think about how it's made and what it takes to take a design for a product and actually bring that to production and scale it, and all the challenges that exist in that process, especially when you're dealing with physical goods and hardware and inventory and cash flow gaps. And I learned some hard lessons.
It sounds like you work real hard. I mean, so you said you were lucky. We're all, you didn't just fall into it. Yeah, you had an opportunity, you took advantage of it, and you created something great out of it. And then on your second company, you did the same thing. I mean, with the company, when you left the drone company, you did the same thing. At your age, I don't know your age, but I assume you were in your 20s when you were doing this.
Yep, I was 24 when I started the battery company.
Right. And for most people in the US at 24, they're not even thinking about starting a battery company. They're still thinking about something totally different. So, and I think you were just in that situation where you were ready for it. And I could hear it in your voice when you're talking, the passion about how you were really into that battery company. And then it really not bothers you, but I mean, it's something that affected you, but it's something that you probably use to help into your next company and possibly your next company, and then some other company down the road. All these experiences are going to make you into better at what you do. And I mean, you never know what's going to happen. This could have happened in the United States with a totally different company. This happens in business all the time. You have to learn from it like you did. And so that with the battery company not getting the exact buyout you wanted, right? Not thinking you're going to be the next multi-millionaire and you're driving your nice Lamborghini everywhere and you don't need any more money. What was the next company that you started?
Yeah, so I came back to the States. I was taking a little bit of time to kind of recalibrate. I reconnected with family after 10 years overseas. And I was actually, I went to public high school. And at my public high school in California, they started an entrepreneurship academy, which I think is a great initiative for a public school. So I came back and was doing a little bit of volunteer teaching for the Entrepreneurship Academy. I was doing a little bit of consulting work. And when the pandemic happened, one of my kind of peer mentors, Grant Morgan, who's now my partner in this business, he reached out to me. And we were just thinking about how in the wake of the pandemic, what we can do to kind of help the world come back online and create safer spaces. And our thesis was that there are certain events throughout history that just create everlasting societal and infrastructural changes. And if you think about 9/11, I mean, after 9/11, we have the Department of Homeland Security. You have TSA with 14,000 agents. Today, you still can't take a water bottle or wear shoes through the airport. You go to a ball game, you walk through a metal detector. These are all new standards around security that were developed specifically because of 9/11. And some of the psychological scar tissue after that event, it accelerated the creation and adoption of those standards, but we never regressed. The world fundamentally had a new posture around security in all shared spaces. And we're thinking that in the wake of COVID, yes, there's a lot of psychological scar tissue now that's accelerating the adoption of certain standards, but the world will fundamentally take on a new posture around biosafety and the standards that all shared organizations need to uphold to keep people safe. So we started looking at the disinfection industry as a whole in thinking about how our response to the pandemic was to go around and pick up backpack sprayers and go hose everything down with chemicals. And that's what we've done. And this entire disinfection industry, I mean, it's governed by Clorox, SC Johnson, Diversey, Ecolab. All of these companies are over 100 years old. It's hundreds of billions of dollars of market cap, and they all just push commodity chemicals. And in 1950, Clorox was selling bleach, and Clorox is still selling bleach today. And we've had all of these technological innovations, but nobody has ever taken a modern technological lens to disinfection. It's still the same 100-year-old companies selling the same commodity chemicals. And we were just dumbfounded by this opportunity. And I think disinfection is one of the very last industries that nobody's ever brought technology to. I mean, where you have retail, you have Amazon. Automotive, you have Tesla. Taxi, you have Uber and Lyft. Music, you have Spotify. But disinfection, there has been nothing. So we started looking at what tools do exist today that have been effective at preventing infection. And we got in touch with Dr. Richard Wade, who's the former director of Cal OSHA. And we actually convinced him to join us as our chief scientist. And he led us on a study of hospitals to understand what do hospitals do well at infection prevention. And our thought was that, I mean, ever since their advent, hospitals are a place where you actually encourage the ill to gather, and you need to learn how to control the spread of disease. So Dr. Wade led us on this study, and we uncovered some of the best technologies and tools that are used in hospitals today. And we said, okay, how do we evolve these, make them even more technologically advanced, and make them accessible not just to a hospital, but to any organization? And the truth is, as part of this study, we learned that there are tools that are effective that are used in hospitals, like floor standing UVC, upper room UVGI. There's a few technologies which to be honest, are not rocket science, but they're priced as an artifact of our healthcare system. They're not priced based on the bill of materials. So these are effective pieces of equipment that have been limited to hospitals because of the healthcare industry. So we saw this arbitrage opportunity where we were able to, we ended up raising more than $60 million in 13 months. We brought, and we're backed by the same backers as Tesla and SpaceX. And so really good engineering and hardware and manufacturing prowess. And in 13 months, we raised more than $60 million, and we brought a series of products to market for infection prevention that are used in hospitals today. And the truth is, we just re-engineered them and built them ourselves, manufactured in the US, and we're offering them to all organizations outside the hospital. So we're doing a lot in schools, senior care, jails, prisons, professional sports, restaurants, hotels. And I think that really all organizations are going to have a new posture around what they do to keep people safe. And the truth is, I think that in the wake of COVID, folks are thinking about COVID now, but there is a huge opportunity to take these technologies to address pathogen issues of other kinds. For example, in food processing plants, it's E. coli. For schools are funded based on attendance. These same tools can stop the common cold, seasonal flu, norovirus. And if we prevent sick days, that's increased attendance and more funding for schools. For sports teams, it's staph infections. Staph infections kill more people than HIV, Parkinson's, and homicide combined every year. So I mean, there's a huge opportunity here to get smarter about the tools we use to disinfect and reduce pathogen load of any kind. And the last thing that we're doing, and then I'll take a breath, Ed, and I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, I get excited here. I get real excited here. But what we are doing is nobody before has ever embedded sensors or IoT boards in any disinfection equipment. So what we can do, and what this really means is, if you think about the world today of disinfection, most cleaning disinfection is done based on time, which to be honest can be totally arbitrary and can have nothing to do with risk. But we can actually outfit buildings with off-the-shelf sensors And what you can do with that is you can actually look at utilization of buildings. So you can see where people go in buildings, how many people in a room, what rooms were used, where traffic is. So if nobody used that conference room, don't send your janitors to clean it at night. If 10 people use that bathroom, I don't care if it's been 2 hours or 2 days, send somebody to clean it. So I think we have this huge opportunity with these sensors to actually get smarter. We can even measure CO2 in the air and VOCs in the air. So you can actually see where people are, what's in the air, and you can actually start cleaning and disinfecting based on risk, not based on time. So when you do that, you, one, create much safer spaces, and two is you use your labor way more efficiently and you cut labor costs. And then with these IoT boards, these Internet of Things boards in all of our products, you can actually generate real-time data. So then you actually have compliance to report back on what the janitors are doing. So right now, most people manually sign their initials on a log, or if you're really fancy, you might scan a QR code and check a box, but there's no way of actually validating what was done. So with these sensors, you can deploy your labor and automate your workflows based on risk. And then with the IoT boards and the products, you actually spit real-time data back so you can actually see what was done. Classroom 17 was turned over before I dropped Johnny off at school, or this hotel room was cleaned before I checked in this morning. So you can actually have that level of visibility. So that's important for, one, creating safer spaces. And also the second half is marketing, because the public is going to start caring. So the ability to have that compliance, but also report to your staff or your patrons what you're doing, that is very valuable. So that's what we're doing now. And we're trying to really modernize the entire disinfection industry. And in 13 months, we've raised $60 million, more than 60 million. We have 53 employees. We're going to double by the end of the year. And we've done more than $15 million in sales in our first 6 months. So we're growing really fast. And I do feel like this has been the positive manifestation of not just the last 13 months of work, but the last 7 years that I was fighting my ass off in China. And I think of this as the manifestation of that entire process and that entire experience. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
All right, my turn.
Anyway. Yep. No, sorry. Yeah.
I'm like, all I'm thinking is, all right, so what are you doing in these hospitals? What does the machines look like? How are they, first, actually, I was thinking what I thought the first time was, not with you, but when I saw it and I saw people started cleaning places, how dirty were these places before COVID? Because no one ever cleaned. No one ever wiped anything. No one ever, you go to the cash register, no one wiped the keypad. No one wiped anything, right? Now that's like all of a sudden it's so important to wipe it. Well, the question is, it must have been extremely dirty before.
Yeah, so. Well, even Clorox put out a study in 2019, so just a couple of years ago, that showed even in hospitals with trained crews, 53% of surfaces are missed when you do a wipe down. So if 53% of services are missed in a hospital with a trained crew, you can only imagine what's happening in a restaurant, in a school. Right. I mean, you have to turn over millions of square feet in a short shift. You only have so much labor. It's impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I also was thinking all these cleaning people who are really upset with your company because now they have to work.
Yep.
Because then they know if they actually went there, not just pushed, ran the little thing through. Yes, I actually cleaned that room. You will know that. Now, are these the same type of, because you were talking about before that they were using a spray chemical. I assume that's not what you're doing. You're using some type of.
Yep. So just quickly on the spray. So I think we're going to look back on 2020 and we're going to be horrified at our chemical consumption. I mean, for the most part, these are harmful chemicals that we dilute with enough water to say that they're safe to go spray around. But it's insane. Just that constant exposure on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis of that kind of chemical exposure of students in a classroom or in a restaurant. I also think we're going to see a lot of lawsuits from the janitorial staff who are going to come down with some gnarly pulmonary infections and go back to their employers and say, hey, you made me go spray this stuff every day. I'm terrified about what we've done to the environment and human health with the use of all those chemicals. Actually, what really is the gold standard in hospitals are these large UVC light towers, and they use these to disinfect operating rooms in between surgeries. In UVC, it's interesting history. It's extremely old technology. In 1903, the Nobel Prize for Medicine was awarded for the discovery of the germicidal properties of UVC. The 1910s, we started using it in wastewater treatment. The 1920s in HVAC. The 1940s, we started using these systems in hospitals. But what's really fascinating is that we started using these in hospitals in the 40s with measles and tuberculosis outbreaks, and they were effective at preventing those outbreaks. But the market didn't skyrocket until 2010. And in 2010, the market erupted. And it's a $5 billion market today. And every well-capitalized hospital in the country now uses UVC light towers to disinfect operating rooms in between surgeries. And what happened in 2010 was Obamacare's Affordable Cares Act. So this is crazy, but prior to the Affordable Cares Act, Medicare and Medicaid were reimbursing hospitals for hospital-acquired infections. So if you went to a hospital for a small surgery and you left with staph infection or something else, that was a $30,000 financial liability for the hospital, but it was reimbursed by Medicare and Medicaid. And when they passed the Affordable Cares Act, they did two things. They raised taxes, and two, looked to cut costs in healthcare to make it more accessible. So Medicare and Medicaid said, you know what? These cost $30,000 to remediate. Hospital, this actually happened on your watch. We're not going to cover it anymore. So for the first time ever in 2010, hospitals finally became liable for the incidences of hospital-acquired infections. And when that happened, because we started using these towers in hospitals in the 40s, there was enough data out there to show over 60 years that hospitals that used these UVC light towers had 93% fewer infections in operating rooms than the hospitals that didn't. But nobody ever cared because they were reimbursed. The hospital had no financial liability. So when they became financially liable with that data point, the market erupted, and now every hospital in the country uses them. But what's really broken and twisted is that there's only a couple manufacturers. Clorox private labels a product called UVDI. There's Xenex and there's TruD. And what they do is they say, hey, it doesn't matter what it costs us to build these things. These infections cost you $30,000 each. And there's enough data out there to show that if you introduce our technology, you'll prevent X number of infections per year. So we're going to sell you this system for over $100,000 because there's a payback period of preventing infections. And here's all the data to back it up. And it's true. And even at over $100,000, it's a logical purchase for the hospital because it prevents infections. But it has nothing to do with what it actually costs to build these things. So when we uncovered that with Dr. Wade's help, we said, hey, we're going to build lights. And that's what we went out and did.
And are they for, and these are for anywhere, right? Businesses? Do you have any for the home, any of that kind of stuff? Or is it only for businesses? And in schools and prisons?
We're focusing on large high-profit organizations. Our biggest markets: schools, jails and prisons, senior care, sports. We do some food packing and food processing. And what's also really interesting is that all large companies over 2,500 employees, they're all self-insured. Once you get to a certain size, it makes more sense for them to underwrite and pay their own health insurance for their employees than to contract it out. Mm-hmm. So what that means is, all these large employers, they don't get their employees gym memberships because they want them to be skinny. They get their employees gym memberships because it reduces their healthcare related expenses. It keeps their employees healthier. That's less cost. If the adoption of these systems can keep employees healthier and reduce sick days, that's a cost savings for these companies. So we're actually seeing a huge amount of traction with large corporations because they're just trying to lower their healthcare related expenses for their employees, which is pretty interesting.
No, I can totally see that. I'm an employer, so I totally understand. Keeping people on the job as much as possible is really good for an employer and employees, so they can have their actual vacation time as vacation time or PTO for actually using to enjoy their life, not because they're sick at home. So I can
Yeah.
totally see that. Yeah. And this is amazing what you guys have done, because I mean, I come from I was a corpsman in the Navy, worked in the medical, and so I always knew the issues that are out there with germs and everything else, and I was always amazed that no one really, like, I get back to clean surfaces, and you know, at so many places where people touch things, and I've been forever washing my hands. My wife says not long enough, but we won't get into that. But constantly, because that's just who I am. But I'm just amazed, like when I went to stores after in COVID, and now they're wiping after you're done, right? And most of the wipe is supposed to be there for so many seconds, right? It's not instantaneously does it gets rid of the germs, but they'll wipe it and then you're supposed to wait, but no one ever does. They go right over and start using it again, right? So
Exactly.
Yeah. So I understand. So
Yeah.
but it's amazing how your story from what you did, right, and then what happened with the battery has gotten you to here. It really has. I mean, and that's what I always want to talk about at Inner Edison, is that the things along the way that makes us who we are usually those great, I don't want to say mistakes, but things that happen to us along the way that we turn into great accomplishments. And that's what I see in you.
It's hard to have faith in that. I mean, over the past several years, I mean, I worked so hard on that battery company. I put my whole heart into it. It was my identity. I received all these public accolades, and I was embarrassed when it failed. I was angry. I was confused. I was sad. I was humiliated. I was. It was really tough to unwind that, and I kept preaching to myself, oh, the experience will be worth it. The experience will be worth it. And it's about the journey and the learnings. And I would say that because objectively, I know that to be true. And that's what all, my mentors tell me. And that's what you read in all the books. But I didn't feel it. Right. I would say it, but I didn't feel it. And only now, for the first time, I'm realizing that. And it is about the journey. And those experiences and failures are what led me here. And it is why I'm doing what I'm doing now. And it took a while for my feelings to catch up with that logic, but I couldn't agree more. Yeah,
you can still be pissed off about it.
I still am pretty pissed off.
Yeah. It's okay. It's all right. But now you'll know exactly what to do to make sure the next, if you do go to get bought out down the road, that it's set up exactly right. Right. You will have that experience that you can't teach that in school. It has to happen to you. Things like this have to happen to you so you understand. And luckily it happened at a point where then your next company is probably going to be so much bigger, much larger, because of the scale of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to protect. So,
Yep. I mean, this is already bigger than anything I ever fantasized and have ever done before. And it's because of that path I took. So.
All right. Anything else you want to add today? I mean, because, and I didn't want to interrupt because you were passionate about what you're talking about. I can see, and you're going right down the path I wanted you to go down. So it was perfect. And, a lot of listeners are going to want to know, these things are going to happen along the way, and it's part of your story. It's okay to be pissed off about it if it happens, certain things happen to you. Just don't let it control you to where you don't make the right decisions going forward.
Yep. I think just the last, if I were to give any parting unsolicited advice, the one thing I've always hung on to is I don't always listen to my dad, but one piece of advice my dad always gave me from the time I was 18 and started working, he said, if you're doing a job you're qualified for, you're doing the wrong job. And I love that. And I think I think a lot of folks end up paralyzed thinking that there's some secret credential you need in order to take the leap, but nobody knows what they're doing. And I think that good things happen when you do something you're unqualified for.
Right. You can always find the right people
to
do that part that you can't do. That's how you need to find out as a business owner. Do what you know to do. Everything else you find somebody else to do.
Yep.
Eli, it was amazing. It was great having you on today. I really appreciate you coming on Inner Edison.
Yeah, I'm great to be here, and thank you. And I'm gonna keep fighting hard. So feel free to follow our story, and any support, we're always happy to take it.
Man, and I would like to have you come back in a year or so, or with your next level where you guys get to, whatever you change to. I'd like to have you share your journey a little bit more, if you would be willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Inner Edison. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and what you learned from our guest's life's journey. Please like, share, and subscribe. And Eli, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you guys. Bye.